Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Mad Meta Magic, where we try to make the magic meta mad. Now, I saw this list actually show up as a 5.0 list recently. It was oh shoot, I've closed the tab. But I'll have a link to the description, a link to it in the description down below. This is Gruul Hardened scales. This deck is well within budget constraints. I think right now it's $85 to play this list. And I've never seen a red-green version before. I've only seen mono-green. Now, the major reason I think it's running red, besides Lightning Bolt for reach, is Kazul's Fury, which can act as a land or as a fling, and I think fling only makes this deck more powerful, so if you can play a free fling, why wouldn't you? Plus, out of the sideboard, we can run Blood Moon and Boil. Also of note, there's Gem Razors in the side. So, basically, the idea of this deck is 1/1 counters. Use Hardened Scales as a way to get a ton of 1/1 counters onto your creatures. You play creatures with modular, so they enter the battlefield with 1/1 counters, and then when they die, they put 1/1 counters on other things. Use the Ozolith to double up on counters. You use the incredibly broken Arcbound Ravager as a way to get tons of counters very quickly. And then you either stack them on a Walking Ballista and shoot your opponent to death, or you just make a really big Ravager and swing. You can also put a ton of counters on Inkmoth Nexus and kill your opponent very, very rapidly. The deck has generally been very fast and very strong, which I imagine makes it better in the current modern metagame, but I figured with only 85 tickets worth of cost here, it was worth at least trying out. So I don't know how... I've played against this deck, or similar decks, a number of times, but I've never actually played Hardened Scales, especially not a version like this. I may have taken a stab at it a while ago, but nothing like this. So let's try it out and see what happens. Alrighty, round one. Here we go. Interesting. Okay, so we have Arcbound Worker, we have the Ozolith, we have animation modules. I don't know the order for this. I'm going to keep this hand, because it does seem powerful, and I'm going to kind of take a stab at what I think is proper order for how to play out these cards, but I'm probably going to be wrong. I'm thinking we play out one animation module, then on turn 2 we play an Arcbound Worker, pay for animation module, then we can play out a Ravager, and then like Ozolith go off. So I think we're going to keep this and see what happens. Opponent starts Blood Crypt untapped into a Thoughtseize. Well, the good news is this hand is kind of Thoughtseize resistant. Grove of the Burnwillow's also doing work against a potential Death Shadow opponent. So, Thoughtseize is a very skill-testing card. It's difficult sometimes to identify what the proper threat is to take. Arcbound Ravager, though, I think was an absolutely fair take, and I think my opponent is on Death Shadow, and because of that, I'm going to have them gain life. 1 life should not matter in this game, at least immediately, but if they're not Death Shadow, we should identify that quickly. Okay, they look like they are probably the... no, this could be Mardu Shadow. I think Mardu Shadow plays a Singleton Savai Triome. I can actually check really quick. I played against a deck like this before. It's used in Rakdos midrange, which does not play the... It does not play Death Shadow or things like Death Shadow. So, we draw a Lightning Bolt. So we're going to play a Forest, play Arcbound Worker, and pay 1. We're not going to use Grove of the Burnwillows to gain our opponent any more life. I think that gaining them 1 life is fine in the short term here, but... Okay, opponent Inquisitions. They're playing a mono hand-hate hand. Take Walking Ballista. We untap. We draw Hardened Scales. So play Hardened Scales. Get that out of our hand. I think my opponent is sitting on a Lightning Bolt or a Fatal Push. If they're planning on using removal this turn, they should probably hit the Servo rather than the Arcbound Worker. Yeah, okay. That makes sense to me. Can we wait on playing out this other animation module? I don't think so. We're just going to play it. Now, pretty much any creature we can top deck that starts with modular, puts a 1/1 counter on stuff, would be pretty insane here. Like, if we could hit a Hangerback Walker, that would be, I think, absurd. And the only reason why my opponent is not super dead right now is because they started off with 3 1-mana hand-hate spells, and removal. Or four pieces of, like, direct interaction, even though they've played no threat. And if they play, like, a Confidant or something that dies to Lightning Bolt, we're going to just go ahead and take that trade. Opponent does have a Fatal Push. Gruul's Fury. I am going to play as a land. Pass the turn. Fling is powerful, but we do need to get some amount of lands out because we have multiple animation modules. So if I draw another Arcbound Worker, I can make 2 servos, and then we're going to go nuts. Opponent plays a Black Cleave Cliffs, probably into... Okay, I was going to say Magmatic Channeler, but it's a Seasoned Pyromancer. So opponent discards their last card in hand, which is an Unearth. And I think I'm going to bolt the Pyromancer. I do have to let my opponent gain a life to do that, though. We untap. We draw Phyrexia's Core. Alright. Pass the turn. That is unfortunate. If we could top deck a Ravager, a Walking Ballista, a Hangerback Walker, an Arcbound Worker, all of those things would be amazing. Really, any of them. We do have Ancient Stirrings, too. That would be another great top deck. So my opponent is going to go to combat and attack for 1. That's fine. We finally go down to 19. We untap. We draw Arcbound Ravager. Perfect. So, play Ravager. This entering the battlefield will cause 2 animation module triggers. My opponent basically has to have instant speed removal for this right now to, like, mitigate what we're about to do. Looks like they're activating Castle Lochthwain to try and draw a Fatal Push or a Lightning Bolt, maybe? Alright, so they draw a card, they lose 3 life. They did not hit it. So make a servo, and pass the turn. Oh boy. That's gonna be a lot of counters. Oh man. What you gonna do, opponent? And Ravager is such a mean card. For anyone who remembers back in the Affinity days in Modern with Mox Opals and stuff, like, Ravager was the card that people were playing Sudden Shock in order to kill. Alright, my opponent plays a Kroxa and forces us to discard. We have no cards in hand, so we lose 3 life. They sack Kroxa, and they can replay Kroxa out of the grave, which it looks like is what they're doing. So we're going to lose another 3 life here. We untap, we draw Lightning Bolt. Sack a servo, put counters on Ravager, make more servos. God, this feels disgusting. Lightning Bolt, the Elemental token. Go to combat, swing lethal. Oh man. What are you gonna do, opponent? It doesn't matter which one you block, you die. This is why Ravager is so good. Look at how crazy this is. Alright, sure. Sack a servo, put 2 1/1 counters on Ravager, use our last mana, make another servo. The fact that you can do all of this without any mana is just absurd. We can't pay because we don't have mana. So we can make this a 10/10 and we can put 10 1/1 counters on the other attacking servo. And the fact that Ravager can sack itself too is just, it's dirty. Yep, hit you for 1 more than you have. We even gained you 2 life. Wow, that was crazy. Man, Arcbound Ravager is great. We also, like, what was that? We survived 3 pieces of removal and 3 hand hate spells? Like, they won for 1 and we beat them. That's insane. Okay, so I think I want Torpor Orb versus their deck, because their deck relies on a lot of creature enters the battlefield triggers like Kroxa and Seasoned Pyromancer and stuff. I could play Pithing Needle, I could play Grafdigger's Cage, because they do play on Earth. They play on Earth and Kroxa. I think I want the Grafdigger's Cage. Maybe the Relic. I don't think I want the Torpor Orbs so much. What do we go down in this matchup? Like, what's bad? We're only playing 2 animation modules? Really? That card felt way better than... Oh man, I don't know. What do we cut here? I think I cut a Throne of Geth, and then, like, maybe a land, even. I don't think I'll play Snow-Covered Mountain because my opponent is a Blood Moon deck. We don't play fetch lands. Yeah, I think I'm just going to cut the mountain here. I know we're pretty land light, but we do have 21 lands left in the deck with the Gruul's Fury. I don't think that's correct. I don't know how to sideboard with this deck yet, so we're gonna do some experimentation while we learn. Yeah, animation module Ravager. Okay. I can work with this. I think. So we're going to keep. I would like a Hardened Scales or an animation module. I don't know, after what we just saw, it seems like this deck should be playing 4 animation modules, but I really don't know. It's super good with Ravager, that's for sure. So opponent starts Wooded Foothills. They mulligan to 6, worth noting. They crack Wooded Foothills, and they get a Blood Crypt untapped, and the Inquisition, which unfortunately for us means they can take anything they want. So they take Ancient Stirrings. We draw Llanowar Reborn. So we're going to start with Inkmoth Nexus into Arcbound Worker. Pass the turn. We do have to be careful with Nexus. We're likely not going to use it unless it will kill our opponent, because our opponent does have so many 1-mana spells that kill it. Opponent fetches up a Swamp. Second Inquisition. They take Scrapyard Recombiner. I wouldn't have taken that card, I don't think. I don't think the tutor is worth what... Like, we have other spells we're going to cast multiples of. I mean, if they have another Hand Hate spell, this kind of makes sense, but that's not the play I would have made. I think I would have taken the Worker, or the Grafdigger's Cage, even. I guess this is a modular too, but... Oh, it doesn't die to Fatal Push. I guess that makes sense. That makes a little more sense than I was giving it credit for. If my opponent has, like, 2 Fatal Pushes, then... I mean, it does die to Revolt Push, it just doesn't die to push straight out of hand. Alright, we untap. We draw the Ozolith. So, play Grove. Play the Ozolith. This card is also crazy. Play Second Worker. Go to combat. Attack for 1. So, like, Ozolith, when a modular creature dies, you put the counters that were on it on another artifact creature. But Ozolith says, whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it. So even if it gets exiled, you put the counters onto the Ozolith, and it effectively, like, gives you double the modular triggers, and it's a 1-mana artifact. So good. Opponent plays Engineered Explosives on 1. Okay, that is actually quite unfortunate. Oh my gosh, if they let us untap with this. They're thinking about not cracking it right now. The penalty for doing so is dire, opponent. I urge you, I implore you to take the option that is available to you now. Unless your hand is Simian Spirit Guide Lightning Bolt, crack the Engineered Explosives now. Okay. Yes, that unassuming board had you in grave danger if you let me untap with it. Okay, we untap. We draw another Grove of the Burn Willows. So, play Grove, play Cage. So there will be no Animate Inkmoth because my opponent is tapped out and we have nothing else to do. So hit my opponent for 1 Infect. Pass the turn. Now we're going to need some pretty decent top decks. But we have stopped our opponent from being able to unearth, at least temporarily, as well as escape Uro. Or not Uro. I keep calling him Uro, but he's Kroxa. We draw Walking Ballista. So, play Llanowar Reborn. I could put Ballista out on 1. If I wait... Nah, I think it's correct. We just play it out. I could graft onto it. I don't think I will yet. Maybe I should. See if my opponent does anything about this. Yeah, I'm actually going to graft onto the Walking Ballista. It's a whole extra point of damage. It could matter in the long run. Alright, my opponent does have a Lightning Bolt. Could you imagine if we had an Ozolith right now? Like, what kind of crazy shenanigans we could be doing? But we did sort of play into Engineered Explosives. At least the 1/1 counter didn't go to waste. It dealt at least 1 damage. But against a Savai Triome, they have only 1 card in hand. And the curve of this deck is so low. I wonder if a black version with Bob in it, Dark Confidant, would be fantastic. Just because, like, we curve out at, like, 2 with so many 0 drops, and we have Scrapyard Recombiner 2 of as, like, 3 drops. Opponent cycles Unearth, because this card isn't dead, even in the face of Grafdigger's Cage. They play a tap land and pass. We untap. We draw a Crag Crown Pathway. We have enough other green and red sources that I'm just going to play the Crag Crown Pathway. I'm going to animate Inkmoth. If my opponent's last card in hand is a removal spell, then they go Hellbent. I guess this isn't technically correct, because if my opponent does have a removal spell, we want them to discard it to potentially a Pyromancer, but they didn't have it, so... 3 mana, they play a Pyromancer. Their last card in hand was Thoughtseize. Alright. Kind of a removal spell, but kind of not important. They pass, we untap, we draw a Snow-Covered Forest. Alright, pass the turn. Kind of bricking here. We have no longer any payoffs because our opponent did Engineered Explosives, our Ozolith. Opponent cycles another Unearth, plays a Bloodstained Mire. They hit us for 3, we go down to 17. First damage of the round from our opponent on turn 7. We untap, we draw Ancient Stirrings. Pretty good top deck. Ooh. I guess it's time for a Ballista. Rest of the bottom. Play Ballista X2. Pass the turn. My opponent probably has removal for this, because their deck is just a pile of removal. Yeah. So we can either ping our opponent twice, or we can ping the Elemental token to shorten the clock a little bit. Or to increase our opponent's clock. So I think that's what we're going to do. Ping the Elemental, ping our opponent. Okay. Opponent cracks Bloodstained Mire and finds a Blood Crypt tapped. They untap. They play a Blood Moon. I mean, we're a deck that also plays Blood Moon, so it doesn't hurt us that much. We untap and draw Kazul's Fury, so we're just going to pass. If we could get a Hangerback Walker here, I think that's our best possible top deck. Because that's something that even if our opponent kills it, it leaves a ton of threat power behind. Kind of just getting pecked to death here. Okay, we draw a Scrapyard Recombiner. So, play Scrapyard Recombiner. Pass the turn. We'll leave up Kazul's Fury. Okay, opponent untaps. Miraculously did not have the immediate kill spell after casting like 5 of them. And by 5, I mean 2 of them and about 3 hand hate spells. Alright, opponent plays a land. Goes to combat and attacks. No blocks. Take 2, go to 11. Opponent passes, we untap. We draw the Ozolith. So, start by playing the Ozolith. Sack Grafdigger's Cage. Get Hangerback Walker. We can either play it on 1, or we can and leave up Kazul's Fury. I actually think we're going to do that. Alright, so we've unlocked our opponent's graveyard for them. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps and draws. Another Blood Moon. They play Castle Lochthwain into a second Seasoned Pyromancer. Okay. They draw 2 cards. Like, Scrapyard Recombiner right now is a repeatable tutor with Hangerback Walker, which is pretty awesome. Because I can go get Walking Ballista, and we can start to do really nasty things. Alright, it looks like my opponent is passing to combat. They attack us for 2. We're going to go down to 9. Opponent was thinking about Inquisition or Thoughtseize. It's a Thoughtseize. So what we're going to do here is Kazul's Fury our opponent. And I think I'm going to sack Scrapyard Recombiner, because if my opponent does not have a 1-mana or a removal spell for Hangerback Walker, which is still pretty likely, but if they don't have one right now, they're going to be in trouble. So we've got a big Hangerback Walker. Oh, opponent, if you had a Fatal Push, you should have done that in response to the modular trigger. So opponent is taking 2 damage from Kazul's Fury, and then 2 damage from their own Thoughtseize, down to 6. If they kill Hangerback on their turn, we can stack all of the Ozolith counters onto a Servo. Or not a Servo, a Thopter. Alright, we untap. We draw Llanowar Reborn. So, go to combat. Attempt to put the counters on Hangerback. So now they have Fatal Push. We're just going to put another counter on Hangerback Walker. So that way we put 4 more count. Oh, no, never mind. So this gets rid of the counters on Ozolith, unfortunately. But it still gives us a ton of Thopters, and my opponent is going to be on a 2-turn clock. Oh, you may move. I don't even have to move. The Ozolith is so good! It's not any one of my Thopters survives and it becomes a lethal threat. My opponent has to have another removal spell. Like, the best case scenario for them is they attack with both their Pyromancers. I chump block each one, and their last card is a Forked Bolt. So we're not blocking. We go to 5. I guess my opponent could play another Seasoned Pyromancer, top deck Bolt, and we would die. But what are the odds? The odds of that are astronomical. I can't believe this is an $85 deck. And we just completely annihilated Rakdos midrange. Though, to be fair, Rakdos midrange is a deck that wants to 1-for-1 with non-exile removal, and modular plus Ravager makes, like, just laughs in the face of non-exile removal. So, we would love to play first. This is definitely a play first kind of deck. This hand is almost really good. If it had a second land, I would keep, but I think I'm going to mulligan. Okay, alright, I can get behind this. This looks good. We'll keep. We put back Kazul's Fury. We start Timber Crown Pathway Hardened Scales, follow up with, like, Animation Module, Lightning Bolt, play Ballista or something. Yeah, we're going to keep. Put back Kazul's Fury. Okay, so start Timber Crown Pathway, Hardened Scales. The Pathway lands are, like, almost strictly better than basics, except for the fact that Blood Moon exists. Like, sure, you can't fetch them, but you don't need to. Ooh, Arcbound Worker. Play Snow-Covered Mountain. Play Animation Module. Play Worker. We unfortunately cannot pay for Animation Module here. Otherwise, this hand would be even more absurd. But my opponent is playing a Field of the Dead deck. This could be Uro. Alright, we draw another Arcbound Worker. Excellent. Attempt to play Arcbound Worker. Nice. Pay for Animation Module. Go to combat. Attack for 2. Man, I feel like I'm putting up some affinity numbers right now. Opponent fetches up a Triome. Plays Misty Rainforest and passes. We untap and draw Walking Ballista. So, go to combat. Attack for 5. Opponent cracks Misty Rainforest. Gets an island. 3 mana. Cycles a Shark Typhoon? Does that even matter? I could have played out Walking Ballista in an attempt to mitigate this. I don't think this matters in the slightest. Play out Ballista. Okay, pass the turn. I'm against Termagurf. I love it. I love your username, opponent. I just realized. Termagurf's amazing. Okay, we untap. We draw Ink Moth. That seems pretty great. Go to combat. Attack for 6. Actually, make that a lot. Okay. We'll not pay for Animation Module. And then we shoot you with Ballista. Holy crap! This deck is good. Alright, we're bringing in the Blood Moons. We're bringing in the Boil. Oh, it's happening. What else do we bring in versus our opponent's deck? We could bring in Relic and, like, Grafdigger's Cage. Where do we go down? Okay, I think it's time to drop the Fling. We'll go down a Throne of Geth and Scrapyard Recombiner. We definitely want the Springleaf Drum in this matchup. Do I want Relic or Cage? I don't think I'm going to need it. I think those are mainly for the Dredge matchup, because Dredge is the only other deck that's going to be, like, fast enough. This hand is kind of slow, but it has a lot of mana. We can start off Ozolith into Hangerback Walker. That might be too slow. I'm going to mulligan. Alright, I'll keep. Put back Grove. Opponent starts Flooded Strand. We start Animation Module, just to get that under the counter spells. Opponent cracks Flooded Strand for a Triome, untaps. Shocks Watery Grave. We untap. Draw Springleaf Drum. So I'm going to play Llanowar Reborn and make a Servo. Because you can't counterspell that. I'm not going to move the 1/1 counter, though. Okay. Yeah, opponent has a counter spell, and they weren't willing to counter. Well, I mean, they can't counter that, so we made them waste kind of a turn holding up mana there. Play Phyrexia's Core. Go to combat. Attack for 1. Opponent does nothing. So, attempt to play Ballista. This they will counter, like 100%. It's just a remand? Okay, play Springleaf Drum. Pass the turn. Opponent cracks Polluted Delta. It's a Breeding Pool tapped. They untap. They play an Uro. We will not put a 1/1 counter on Uro. They gain 3 life. They can ramp out a land. It's a Misty. Okay, we untap. Draw a 3rd Ballista. I feel like we're drawing too many Ballistas at this point. So, play Timber Crown Pathway. Play Ballista X1. Doing this pre-combat to play through a mana leak. So we make a servo. I'm not going to pump the servo. I will put a counter on Ballista. Unless my opponent Fatal Pushes in response. At which point I will just... First I'm going to tap Ballista for green. Then I'm going to ping my opponent. Fatal Push resolves. Graft no longer valid targets. Then I will play another Walking Ballista. I will not move the counter, or I will not pay for Animation Module because I can't. I think I am going to move the counter now, even though I can't pay for the servo here. Because I kind of want to start sticking a board presence. Hit our opponent for 1 with the servo. Problem is my opponent can play Uro next turn. If they do, it uses almost all of their mana. Mystic Sanctuary, they're going to put Fatal Push on top. Okay. Opponent untaps. They are going to Fatal Push Ballista. Ping our opponent. And I guess now if they play Uro, I can just try and play a slightly larger than normal Ballista. They did not play Uro, indicating that my opponent probably has like a Cryptic. Go to combat. Attack for 2. Take my opponent to 11. Play a Crag Crown Pathway. Play Walking Ballista X1. Opponent remands. Okay. Play Walking Ballista X1. I think they have a mana leak, but I'm still going to play into it here. Another remand. So opponent got to draw 2 cards, and I didn't need to let them. Okay, opponent untaps. They play an Uro. They're going to gain some life. They put a Misty into play. They pass, we untap. We draw the Ozolith. Play Ozolith. Play Ballista, X2. Make a servo. Pass the turn. No attacks. So my opponent is going to Mystic Sanctuary Fatal Pushback. Oh, they get a Water Grave tapped. Okay. Maybe not. Okay, they untap. They shock Breeding Pool. 3 blue, they're going to gain control of Ballista. Alright, shoot our opponent. Shoot our opponent again. They go to combat. They attack and gain 3. Draw a card. No lands into play. No blocks. We'll take 6. Go to 14. And they are representing Cryptic mana. Okay. We untap. Draw Grove of the Burn Willows. Go to combat. We'll try attacking for 3, just to offset Uro's life gain. We needed to top deck a non-land. We're kind of flooding right now. I do think maybe I should have brought in Cage and Relic. Maybe at least on the play those might be better than... Or on the draw those might be better than Moon. So opponent is going to attack for 6, gain back up to 12. They draw a card. They hit us for 6 down to 8. We untap. We draw Arcbound Worker. Go to combat. Attack for 3. Problem right now is I don't think this worker is going to resolve. If it did, it would be really good, but I don't think that's what's going to happen here. Play worker. I don't think my opponent can let us get any 1/1 counters on board. Okay. They did. So, make a servo. Pass the turn. They're going to draw 2 cards with Archmage's Charm. Archmage's Charm seems conspicuously good against the Ozolith or any other one thing we stack counters on, typically. Opponent goes to combat, attacks for 6. We are going to put another counter on Arcbound Worker. Opponent is going to Fatal Push Arcbound Worker. I'm okay with this. So we modular a servo that will be attacking, not the one that's going to block. Opponent is going to Assassin's Trophy Ozolith in response of all things. Sure. Get a forest. So no counters on Ozolith. Counter on servo. We get a servo. Can't put a counter on something that doesn't exist. Okay, they gain 3 and draw. Put an island into play. Chump, and then we can sack this servo to gain a life. Nice. Yeah, I think I actually would have countered that 1/1 with the 1/1 counter. We untap, draw Ravager. Well, if Ravager hits the board, I think it's all over. So let's endeavor to make that happen, shall we? Play Ravager. Opponent has Snapcaster Mage, probably for Archmage's Charm. Okay. And they've got a counter, there's no other options. Yeah. Okay. So then we can Lightning Bolt Snapcaster Mage to clear the way. Put another counter on the servo. Can I just say that this deck feels amazing right now? Oh, shoot. That was a mistake. I misread the prompt and clicked through it. But like I said, wouldn't be a Kano video without a punt. Okay, attack for 5. We'll leave a servo back to block. Hit our opponent down to 8, or 7. They're going to go back up to 10 this turn. So opponent goes to combat, attacks for 6. They gain 3. They put a swamp. A very cool promo swamp into play. Seb McKinnon art, gotta love it. So we block. Sack the servo to gain a life. Then our opponent is passing. Okay, they're doing something else here on their second main. They play Jace and unsummon the servo. Really? You're not brainstorming with Jace. Interesting. We untap and draw Ink Moth. Go to combat. Attack Jace. They must have another counterspell, so they feel pretty safe here. I guess I would too if I was them. Okay. I'm going to restart the client really quick, and then I'll go to game 3. Alrighty, back to sideboarding. I think I'm going to bring in Cage and Relic. I don't think I'm going to play Boil. I think it's a little bit too mana expensive for our average hand. And Throne of Geth, while it is very powerful, I think is not worth keeping in right now. We're going to run it back. We will be back on the play, which is a huge boon. We will play first. Alright, I mean, this seems pretty good. We'll keep. So what do we do here to start? So we definitely go untapped land. Now we either play Springleaf Drum or Animation Module, and I'm trying to think of how this works out in my head. We need to play Animation Module. Okay, pass the turn. Because next turn we can play Llanowar Reborn, get a token. Opponent starts Polluted Delta. Draw another Llanowar Reborn. So play Llanowar Reborn. Make a servo. We will not be grafting. Pass the turn. Opponent plays a Zagoth Triome and untaps. Play a Watery Grave untapped. We untap. Draw a third Llanowar Reborn. So play Llanowar Reborn. Pay 1, make a servo. Opponent is going to Abrupt Decay Animation Module. That's kind of rude. I am going to move one of the counters over anyway, but I'm not going to move over both. Actually, I am going to move over both, because I have the Ozolith. But I should do this right. We're going to play Springleaf Drum, tap the creature, play the Ozolith, go to combat, attack for 1. Man, that's great. Opponent plays an island, casting... Oh, they gain control of it. Okay. Well, we untap, we draw Hardened Scales, so play Llanowar Reborn. Or play Hardened Scales, play Llanowar Reborn, play Hangerback Walker. And we will graft, go to combat, attack for 1. It's unlikely my opponent has a second Archmage's Charm. Maybe I should have played Ravager, actually, in case they did. Okay, opponent plays Uro, so they got nothing. Put a Field of Ruin into play. Are they dead? I think they're dead. Play Arcbound Ravager, play Arcbound Worker, go to combat, attack here, attack here. Opponent chumps the servo. Modular onto Ravager first. Sack Springleaf Drum. Sack the Ozolith. Sack Ravager. Put 1,000,000 counters on Hangerback Walker. 18 damage exactly. Oh my gosh, I didn't even do the math. I'm glad it worked out in my favor and I did the right thing with the Arcbound. Because if you modular onto Arcbound Ravager, you get the plus from Hardened Scales. And then when you modular Ravager, you get the plus again. So you just move the counters around as many times as possible. We just beat Uro. Oh man, this deck is awesome. I'll see you guys in round 3. Holy crap. Alrighty, round 3, here we go. Well, if my opponent shows up, they do. And we are on the play. Awesome. We are going to keep, and we're going to start turn 1 Hardened Scales. Pass the turn. My opponent plays a Misty, cracks Misty, and finds a Temple Garden untapped into a Noble Hierarch. We untap. We draw Throne of Geth. So play Grove, play Worker, play Springleaf Drum, Ancient Stirrings. We find Llanowar Reborn. Rest of the bottom. Pass the turn. Opponent plays another Noble. Goes to combat. Does not attack. We untap. We draw Ravager. Oh my gosh. Things are about to get crazy. Play Llanowar Reborn. Play Ravager. If my opponent has a path, they're going to path Arcbound Worker right now. Okay, we are not grafting. Go to combat. Attack for 2. Pass the turn. Opponent plays an island. Trying to think of what this could be. This looks like a Collected Company deck, maybe? Okay, we untap. We draw another Hardened Scales. Oh my gosh. Play Hardened Scales number 2. Play Hangerback. Opponent Cocos. So this is probably a Spell Queller deck, like a Spirit. Oh my gosh, they just concede! What are we playing? Oh man. Maybe we Torpor Orb versus our opponent's deck? Because, like, it seemed like to me they were like, oh, we got a Collected Company and see if we hit Spell Queller. Like, it's Spirits? I don't know, though. I'm going to cut a Scrapyard Recombiner and a Kazul's Fury, and we're going to try it like this. All I can tell you is my deck is awesome right now. This hand is potentially very good. I think I'm going to mulligan, though. This hand is way better. I think just objectively better. I'm going to keep this hand, and I'm going to put back Grove of the Burn Willows. I'm cutting myself off of red if I draw Lightning Bolt, but I'm not even that worried about it. So we're going to start turn 1 Hardened Scales, turn 2 Hangerback, turn 3 Ravager, plus hopefully another 1-drop. Or we can just tick up Hangerback really, really fast. Alright, opponent starts with a Flooded Strand. They mulled to 5. Play Timber Crown Pathway, start Hardened Scales. We draw Scrapyard Recombiner, which is a pretty good play on turn 3, I think. Opponent fetches up a Temple Garden tapped. Okay. They play Misty and pass. We draw Mountain, so we no longer have to worry about drawing bolts. Play Hangerback Walker X1. Pass the turn. Opponent fetches with Misty. They find a Hallowed Fountain tapped. They pass, untap, play a Field of Ruin. Skyclave Apparition hitting Hardened Scales. Okay, I kind of think you should have hit you should have hit Hangerback Walker, but I mean, I guess to each their own. Play Snow-Covered Mountain. Play Ravager. And pass the turn. Opponent shocks Temple Garden. Plays a second Skyclave Apparition. They're going to hit Ravager. Put a counter on Walker. Sack Walker. Get a bunch of tokens. Put a counter on Ravager. Then we will sack Ravager to put some counters on a Thopter. And now my opponent can't attack with Skyclave unless they have a path. Or they want to trade with a Noble Hierarch. Actually, we're going to win this race. We'll take 3. Untap. We draw a second Ravager, because this deck is just crazy. Play another bigger Hangerback. Attack for 5 in the air. Hit our opponent to 11. Opponent has the triple Skyclave Apparition hand and hits Hangerback Walker. And they are out of cards. They attack us for 4. Sure. Untap. We draw Phyrexia's Core. Play Phyrexia's Core. Play Ravager. Play Scrapyard Recombiner. I could put a bunch of counters on a Thopter. Is it enough? Hang on. So this is, if I sack, it's 1 counter on Ravager. We can put 2 counters on Thopter. Then I could sack Ravager, putting 2 counters on Thopter for a total of 9 damage this turn, taking my opponent to 2. What do they do about that? I don't think they can do anything. And there's nothing that says I have to put it all on 1 Thopter either. So use Recombiner's ability, sack Ravager, pump this Thopter, go to combat, attack for 9, and now I have 3 lethal flyers. So like, unless my opponent has land and Elishnorn in their 1-card hand, I think we've got them. Or if they play like, okay, Collected Company is a pretty good top deck. Icefang Kotal Auriok Champion, which gains them a life and draws them a card. They'd have to draw like Path. If they draw another creature they can play, they can gain up to 4. We still beat them. Oh my gosh. This deck is bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. I'll see you guys in round 4. Alrighty, round 4, here we go. Alright, we've lost the die roll and are on the draw. This hand is a little bit slow. It does have an Ancient Stirrings. I think I'm still going to mulligan. This is also a mulligan. I think I do have to keep this, though. So we have to put back 2 cards. We're going to put back Ancient Stirrings. Oof. Hang on. I want to keep Arcbound Worker and Hardened Scales. I think I put back Arcbound Worker and a Walker, maybe? Because if we top deck a land, this is like the nuts. And if we don't, we can Ancient Stirrings. So opponent starts Basic Forest, Arboreal Grazer, so it is probably prime combo. They play a bounce land, so play Grove, play Hardened Scales, pass the turn. Slightly annoying that Grazer has reach. They play a Dryad of the Elysian Grove into a Vesuva, picking up a forest. We untap. We do not draw a land, which means we must Ancient Stirrings. We hit an Inkmoth Nexus, rest of the bottom, play Inkmoth, pass the turn, and I think our hand is just going to be a little too slow here. Opponent plays another Dryad, explores, playing a Cavern, probably naming Giant, yep. Hits us for 2, we go to 18. We untap, we draw another Ravager, so play Hangerback on 1, pass the turn. They need to, like, not have Primeval Titan somehow. Play Amulet. 3rd Dryad. Opponent attacks us for 4. We're not going to block. We untap. Draw an Arcbound Worker. Okay, so play Worker. We need them to not have it for one more turn, basically. That's not true. We need them to not have it for a little bit longer. We need them to not have it for 2 turns, and we would pretty much be able to beat them. So pass the turn. But if our opponent plays Titan at any point, we just die. Because then they go get double Valakut, and we lose. Yeah, okay, so they drew Titan. Yeah. Alright. So we're going to play Torpor Orb, Damping Sphere, and Blood Moon. Meaning we're cutting a Kazul's Fury, a Scrapyard Recombiner, our Thrones of Geth. And Lightning Bolt actually is not that good. I'll keep 1 in the deck just in case we need to top deck some Reach, but I don't think that's going to work. Alright, we'll play first. Wish one of these was a Hangerback, but I think... Yeah, I'm going to mulligan. Okay. Potentially this is great. I'll keep, put back Phyrexia's Core. And we start with either Springleaf Drum or the Ozolith, and I think the correct choice is the Ozolith. So, Inkmoth Nexus, Ozolith. Pass the turn. Opponent starts Wooded Foothills, cracks Wooded Foothills, gets a Forest, plays Grazer, Bounce Land. We untap, draw second Ozolith. That is not particularly useful. So, play Grove of the Burn Willows. And I think I play Ravager here. Pass the turn. Opponent plays a Dryad of the Elysian Grove into a Castle Garenbrig. We untap. We draw a second Inkmoth. So we can't kill our opponent even if I can somehow get enough counters on Arcbound Ravager because of Grazer having Reach. Play Inkmoth. Play Springleaf Drum. We can sack Ozolith and then replay it. I could animate Inkmoth, sack Springleaf Drum, sack Ravager, but that's not going to be lethal. Okay, we're just going to pass, I think. Actually, maybe stacking the counters up on Inkmoth Nexus and then swinging to kill Grazer and then swinging again to try and kill our opponent. Might have been the way to go, but I think the issue is, well, that for one. I need to top deck a Blood Moon now. We untap, draw Ballista, play Ballista X1. Animate Inkmoth, go to combat, attack, opponent chumps, sack Ballista. Oh, I should have done this pre-combat first to put a counter on the Ozolith. Put a counter on Ravager, sack Ravager, putting the counters on the creature, putting counters on the Ozolith, kill Grazer. But if my opponent can play Titan and kill us, or if they can play Titan and then play untapped Ghost Quarter effects, we also lose. We go to 18. Opponent has land, shooting us for 6. And if they have Titan, we lose. I've not played against this deck yet where they did not have Titan on time. Oh, we're just dead anyway because they can just fetch. Alright, yep. Well, honestly, our opponent's deck is very strong. And our deck, I didn't have the best opening hands, as evidenced by the mulligans. But I also didn't draw my sideboard of Blood Moon at all, and I did mulligan once to try and find it. So I'm not going to be real upset about that. We'll go into round 4. Yeah, I'll see you guys there. Alrighty, round 5, here we go. We have lost the die roll. We're against Battle of Wits in the 3-1 matchup? Oh my gosh. Alright. Opponent, you have my respect. Oh, this hand is almost good. We're going to 5, though. If I lose, I want to lose to Battle of Wits. So we're going to put back Phyrexia's Core and Lightning Bolt. What iteration of Battle of Wits are they playing? Is it the combo version? Bant version? Alright, it's looking like Bant. Oh, okay, it is probably the combo version. That makes sense. So, play Timber Crown Pathway. Play Springleaf Drum, I guess. Pass the turn. So my opponent is likely playing the version that's playing like Bring to Light. They're going to play Gifts Ungiven. They're going to play all of the single card combos that win the game. Like they're probably playing Scape Shift as well. Prismatic Vista. They crack Prismatic Vista. They get a basic island into a Dryad of the Elysian Grove. They play an Arid Mesa and pass. Probably also playing Titan Shenanigans, really. Play Ink Moth. Play Animation Module. Pass the turn. I'm having to take a really weird opening here. I don't know if my opponent is playing counter spells. I don't know if they're just 5-color because they're proactive. Like, they could be playing Vanifar. They could be playing... Okay, they're playing Soccer Tribelder. Okay, yes. I have seen this list before. So it even plays the dual-color Tapland Snowlands. But it plays a whole bunch of, like, differently named stuff because it plays Gifts Ungiven and things like that. Alright, we untap. Draw Snow-Covered Forest. So, play the Forest. Play Hangerback, X1. Make a Servo. Slowest start this deck has had yet, but I kind of want to see more of my opponent's deck anyway, even though, I mean, we're probably going to lose to it, at least this game. Worth noting, they're playing, like, all basics and fetch lands. Uro. Okay. They gain some life. Put a Stomping Ground into play untapped, so my opponent can... They can't replay Uro yet. They can now, because they're going to be dumping fetch lands into the grave. Okay. I mean, if we can get a Ravager and our opponent doesn't have a like Path or something as their last card in hand, last 2 cards in hand, we can probably beat them. So opponent got a Triome. They need an untapped land if they want to play Uro. I was expecting them to get untapped mana. That tells me they probably don't have anything to interact with at least this turn. And they shock Blood Crypt. They're going to replay Uro, exiling their entire grave. Okay. So Uro enters, they gain life. They put a Stomping Ground into play tapped. And they attack for 2. No blocks. Yeah, if we can draw a Ravager, I'm pretty sure my opponent just dies. They untap and draw the Ozolith. So play Phyrexia's Core. Play the Ozolith. Pass the turn. So we can use Springleaf Drum mana to activate Hangerback Walker and then put another 1/1 counter on Hangerback, or we can just make a Servo. So my opponent goes to combat. Okay, they're going to attack with both. They gain 3 life and draw. They do not put a land into play. So block here, and then tap a Servo, put a counter, and then we'll just put a counter on as well. We're not making any additional servos at this time. So Hangerback survives the bump. We lose the servo. We take no damage. Opponent puts Yorion in their hand. They can flicker Uro. Okay. So Ravager is no longer lethal because they do have a flying blocker. They're going to flicker Dryad. Play Noble. Okay. They get back Dryad. We untap. Draw a second Hangerback. Play a Snow-Covered Mountain. Play Hangerback Walker. Make a Servo. Pass the turn. We can make another Servo and then block. We could Animation Module to put a counter on the other Hangerback Walker, but I think just making a Servo and blocking is better. Okay. When it gains 3 life and draws, I Man, I would never have guessed I was going to play Battle of Wits in the final. Opponent gets an Exalted trigger, so jump with a Servo. Opponent plays a Windswept Teeth. There's a number of things that we just instantly die to if they cast like Escape Shift or a Bring to Light. Or whatever this is, oh my gosh. Time Stretch? Like, what mana do you need? 8 mana. I think I die to most things that are 8 mana, or 9. Rampant Growth. Panglacial Worm. I do not die to Panglacial Worm. But I do love me some Panglacial Worm, the old cast from your deck while you're searching card. I love playing that card. Man, I should play some Battle of Wits. I haven't played Battle of Wits in forever. It used to be the deck I'm known for instead of Tron. Alright, make a Servo. We untap. We draw. I'd like to draw not lands for a bit. Play Crag Crown Pathway. And pass the turn. Still pretty confident that if we can draw a Ravager, we're like good to go. So put it on their end step, does nothing. They untap. They go to combat. They attack. Gain 3 life and draw. So we are going to block. Hanger back here. Not hanger back. Servo here. Add a counter. Make a Servo. Add a counter. Make a Servo. Then we're going to add a counter to this Ballista using Springleaf Drum, Phyrexia's Core, Inkmoth Nexus, because the more counters that are on it when it dies, the more counters go onto the Ozolith. We take less damage this way as well. Panglacial Worm. Oh, I miss Panglacial Worm so much. Put a billion counters on the Ozolith, get a billion flying blockers, one of which next turn is going to be stacked very large for Yorion, or we could put the counters on Inkmoth Nexus if my opponent doesn't have a Bolt. Okay, the game is lagging very much. We get 6 Thopters. Okay, we untap. We draw a Walking Ballista. I don't think we can play a Walking Ballista with enough counters to matter. So, animate Inkmoth. Go to combat. Put a bunch of counters on Inkmoth. Make a Servo. Go to combat. I just clicked through combat. Oh, I hate the Moto interface so much. And with this lagging, I'm like anticipating different keystrokes. That's so terrible. Oh, I'm gonna lose because of that. Oh my god. Oh, I hate it so much. Okay, well, play Walking Ballista. Make a Servo. Pass the turn. Oh, that was so bad. My opponent has something. Oh, okay, they have another Panglacial Worm. So, fun fact about Panglacial Worm, you actually have to float the mana prior to searching your deck, because you can't activate mana abilities while searching your deck. Now, this card is the epitome of a rules nightmare. It's not as bad as the Lycids. Pro tip. The rules manager for Magic for years refused to acknowledge that Lycids exist. But Panglacial Worm has caused several issues. I love Cold Snap so much. It was a great, stupid shenanigans set. Okay. My opponent untaps. They get to draw. Like, we're just super dead to Escape Shift, Bring to Light. Okay, they're cycling a land. At this point, like, they could even just draw their, like, whatever 9-drop finisher if they have Elish Norn, or if they have Iona would be a problem. Not as big of a problem, because we could still kind of deal with it, but... Okay, opponent's attacking for a lot. So, animate Springleaf Drum. Or animate Inkmoth using Springleaf Drum mana. Opponent gains 3, draws, does not put a land into play. Block Uro with a 7/7. Throw 5 servos under the bus versus... Or 4 servos and a Thopter. Okay, we're still going to take some damage over the top. Can't believe I missed an attack with that Inkmoth Nexus. Opponent makes the distinct decision to not tap Colonnade. And we're dead. It didn't matter in the long run because we only got that turn anyway, but we should pretty handily beat this deck because our opponent's deck is just Inconsistent Titan. So bring in the Blood Moon, bring in the Torpor Orb, drop Kazul's Fury, Scrapyard Recombiner, the other Kazul's Fury, and I think 2 Lightning Bolts. I don't think I'm going to bring in Boil. Yeah, we're just going to run it like this, I think. So this version of the deck seems to not max out on what appears to be Arcbound Ravagers, like the strongest hands this deck can produce. It seems to be like a little bit more toolboxy with like the Scrapyard Recombiners and stuff. Also, you can't tutor up Arcbound Ravager with Scrapyard Recombiner because it only tutors up constructs, and Ravager for some reason is a beast. Well, like every other artifact creature known to man is a golem or a construct. Or, on rare occasion, a gargoyle. Okay. Well, we do have Ravager. We do have Animation Module. I'm going to keep... this combo alone is probably strong enough, along with Llanowar Reborns and whatnot, to just make a huge wide board, stack up Inkmoth Nexus, and kill my opponent super fast. Alright. So we are going to start Inkmoth Nexus, Animation Module, pass the turn. Opponent starts Breeding Pool tapped. We untap, draw Scrapyard Recombiner, play Llanowar Reborn, make a servo. We're not grafting. Pass the turn. Opponent untaps. They play a Steam Vents into a Growth Spiral. Man, could you imagine if I could just like Blood Moon my opponent next turn into a Field of the Dead? We untap. We draw Arcbound Worker. So play Crag Crown Pathway. Play Arcbound Worker. Pay for Animation Module. We are not grafting onto the servo. We will graft onto Arcbound Worker. Pay for Animation Module. Go to combat. Attack for 1. My opponent probably has a bunch of Pyroclasm effects in his deck now. It's just like his sideboard's like mono Pyroclasm, Anger of the Gods. Including the little-known Flame Break. Not really, but I think it would be funny. Don't do it. Don't you do it. Okay, it's a Dryad. They gain some life. We untap. Draw Crag Crown Pathway, and I'm pretty sure that my opponent's just dead now. So we can play Ravager. Animate Inkmoth. We're not paying for Animation Module. Sack Servo. Sack Servo. Sack Servo. Sack Worker. Modular on the Nexus. We will use its ability. Sack here. Sack here. Oh, hang on. Cancel. I forgot to let one of the abilities resolve. We're not going to pay. Put a counter on Ravager. Sack Ravager. Put a bunch of counters here. Yep. Okay. Go to combat. Let the Animation Module triggers resolve. Go to combat. Attack for 9 Infect in the air. Pass the turn. Does my opponent have a Fatal Push? They have a Path. I am very upset. I should have just kept going wide. I was like, what are the odds? What are the odds they have single target removal that isn't Bolt or, you know, whatever. It's Battle of Wits, though. Oh well. I did the math wrong. I shouldn't have done that because it didn't kill my opponent outright. I only should have done that if it killed my opponent. So now my opponent's going to start making tokens. We no longer have an Animation Module, which was like the strength of our entire hand. Sorry, someone started up the printer. Opponent gets a Panglacial Worm and attacks us for 2. That's not a zombie token. Alright, we untap. We draw Ancient Stirrings. Well, I'll go ahead and Ancient Stirrings, but I don't think there's anything I can get here. Yep. I'm just gonna go ahead and concede. Oh well. So that's a pretty rookie mistake to make with the Hardened Scales deck. I've capitalized on other people doing it, and then I've just performed it myself. So, I mean, don't do what I just did. This deck is awesome. It's incredibly strong, and I got a little bit unlucky in a couple of situations and also punted very hard several times. Not a great treasure chest to open at all, but I'll go ahead and talk about the deck here for a minute. So, I am by no means an expert. However, printer, that's right. So, I'm by no means an expert, but like I said, I'm no means an expert, but I really think we ought to be maxing out on animation modules. It's not an effect you want multiple of all the time, especially when you don't have that much mana early. But like, animation module plus Arcbound Ravager is just incredibly powerful. Throne of Geth seems like it might be too slow, but if you're stacking 1/1 counters, like if you like Llanowar Reborn chain onto animation module tokens, you can like then start sacking other stuff and just creating an absurd number of tokens to overwhelm your opponent. Gruul's Fury, we did some cool stuff with it early on. It might be a little bit ambitious, but like just having a land that you can turn into a fling is great. I think the deck is borderline playing too many tap lands. Maybe that's just my propensity to draw Llanowar Reborn, but I feel like we need to untap lands to play all of our stuff early because we play so many 1-drops. I don't know. Boil also felt like it might be too much mana. Gem Razor's nice because it's a pump spell and artifact or enchantment removal, but yeah, other than that, I think I would swap up the list a little bit because it feels slightly memey, but it's also still pretty powerful. I like the Blood Moon out of the sideboard. I think that's great. Even though it shuts off our Inkmoth Nexuses, we don't need those to win. But I feel like it's sacrificing too much else by playing... I don't even think I would play Scrapyard Recombiner. I understand that it's powerful, like, repeatedly tutoring up stuff after playing, like, a Hangerback Walker or turning a Arcbound Worker into a Walking Ballista to end the game, but it's also, it requires you to untap and it's 3 mana. Maybe. I'll get some more reps in with Hardened Scales at some point, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, drop a comment, subscribe to the channel if you're so inclined, and remember you can follow me on Twitch, same username over there as you find me on here. I stream Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. It's been a little bit earlier than usual, but I'll see you guys next time. Bye!